It looks like we aren't going to get any more participants in this meeting, so we'll just get started. So welcome everyone to the fourth session of this Scratch course. And before we begin to do anything today, begin any coding, we're actually going to have you guys submit the homework from last week, which was to complete all the button sequences. Like in class, we did the 4-way movement one for the cat. And then at home, you guys were supposed to do the driving, just the car, and then also the mouse movement, which was our basketball right here. So we're going to be submitting this first before I go through any of the code. So in order to do this, in order to submit anything or share your project with anyone, you need to make sure that you're logged into your Scratch account here. Make sure you're logged in here, and make sure you've clicked this button that says shared. Usually it's orange if you haven't shared it, but if you have shared it under your account, it should be on this dark blue color and it should say shared. So I want everyone to take a minute and just click the share button on whatever they have on the current project right now.
Teacher, I don't have a share button.
Okay, are you logged into your account?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, make sure you're logged into your account. This only works if you're logged into your account and if you have verified your email. So make sure the top right here, it has to say your username. Then there should be a large orange button here if you have verified your email for Scratch.
Oh.
Okay, and then after you have done that, after you've shared your thing, go to the project page. So it's next to the share button, it says see project page. Go there and then click on the link that you have here and just press Ctrl+C and copy it. And where I want everyone to paste it is under the chat feature. Everyone should be able to private message. So I want everyone to private message Eric. So I want everyone to private message Eric and send your link into there. So I don't want everyone to send their link to the entire group. Just send it to Eric, who you should see like a TA bracket next to his name. So I'm going to give everyone another minute to do that, and then after that's done, I'll just quickly go over the code and see what we have to do today. Okay, that should be enough time. But if you don't, if you haven't submitted your project yet, you can do it at the end of this lesson. But what I want everyone to do right now is to go to My Stuff under your profile. So click on your username and go to My Stuff. And I want you to make a copy. Sorry. Go to see inside. Yeah. Go to see inside your project. And I want everyone to click on File and Save as a copy. So what this will do is save your current project as a new project that you can still build on. But the reason that we're going to be creating multiple projects is because you're going to be you already submitted your projects to Eric, and even if you code more in here, we can still see all the different changes that you made from today's class. So we want to see what everyone did at home. So I want everyone to go to File and Save as a copy. And so now you can see that the project was saved as a copy. And the way you check that is by looking up here, and it should say scratch, whatever. It should say the original name of your project plus this copy at the end. So for today, I want everyone to be coding on the copy of their project here so that we can check the homework that you did from last week. Okay, I'm going to delete my copy because I'll still be coding on the same one, but everyone else, please make sure to continue coding on the copy version, not the original version that you just submitted. Okay, so we're going to go over the solution for the different buttons now. So in here, you can see that it's pretty much a direct copy what we did for the four-way movement, which was broadcasting different messages when the different buttons were clicked, and also when the decreasing button animation finished. And we also and you also had to make the other, like all the other buttons disappear. So that's what these other when I receive button clicked blocks are for. And something really important to note here that you might not have in your code is this first block of code underneath the when I receive other button clicked block is this stop other scripts and Sprite. So what this will do is to make sure to stop everything else that is happening in this sprite. So as you can see under our start game button animation finish, we have this forever loop. And if we don't put this here, then this will go on forever. And let's say, so this is the four-way movement button, which is around here. And if we click on this exact spot again, that will cause an error to the rest of our program because it will continuously broadcast these two messages and then cause bugs for when the different messages get broadcasted again. So we need to make sure to stop this script before we go on to do the disappearing animation. So this code should be pretty much the same as your other two. You can see they're pretty identical except for the position and the different different message calls. Okay, and then another thing is to make sure that you have the correct movement sprite set up to each of your buttons. So for the cat, we corresponded it to the four-way movement button right here. And for the car, we had it with the driving movement. And for the basketball, we had it with the mouse movement. And make sure you separate out the when green flag clicked and the message block. So this green flag clicked block must always be there, so you can determine the status of your sprite at the beginning of the game. And then this message block is just for whenever you want it to show or do something when it receives a message. So I'm going to give everyone just a minute to catch up on the code that we have so far. And if anyone doesn't have this code, I can share it in the chat right now. Okay, everyone should have the link, so I'm just going to move on because we have quite some new things to cover today. So if you look, click on your four-way movement button code, and if you look inside here, a lot of the code looks pretty similar, right? Like we have this set size to 100, and then the the disappearing animation, and we have it like 3 times in our code. And this basically makes our code pretty long. So we want to find some way to make it a little shorter and make it more pleasing for other people who want to view your code, make it easier for them to look at your code and see what you mean. And also, if you do it like this, it makes it very hard for you to spot out errors because you have 3 different instances of the same code in your sprite, and if one doesn't work, you have to search through the entire code, each one, to see if something's wrong. But if you see something wrong continuously and it has to do with these blocks of code, then you know, then you can go to that particular solution and hunt down what's wrong. So how do we do this? So what we're going to do is create a block under my blocks here. So what we're going to be creating is called methods. They're called methods. And what we can do is basically paste this code under our methods and use one singular block underneath each of these instances to make it easier for us to read. So before we can do any of that, we need to first create the block. So click on make a block over here, and it will bring you to this block page where you can name your block and add other things in it. Okay, so what we want to do is, so you see that there are 3 different kind of labels here. One is to add an input like a number, one is to add a boolean, which is remember the hexagonal shape, and one is to add a text, which is what we already have here as the name. So what we're going to do is click on the middle one, add an input boolean, and you will see why later. So for our block name, we always have to name our block. So we're going to be naming it disappear animation because that's basically what we're doing with all of these blocks of code here. We're making the buttons disappear, right? And for the boolean, we want to check if our button is clicked or not. So what we want to do with this essentially is, remember when under like when we receive the start game button, when we under here we have these broadcasting messages underneath here, but they aren't. They don't exist in when any of the other buttons are clicked. So we don't need to broadcast any messages here. We just need to receive the messages and act accordingly. So what click does is we can set a Boolean value to say if it's clicked, then you can broadcast these messages. But if it's not clicked and it's one of the other buttons that's being clicked, then we can just do this simpler animation. Okay, now if you notice up here, our method block that just came out, this red one over here, it automatically came out. It says define disappear animation clicked. And we basically have to tell the computer, the Scratch program, what we want to do with our code, because they can't, the computer can't understand what is in our head, right? We have to code it out so that it can fully understand what we want to do in our code. So first, what do we want to do? Well, if we just look at our code here, this is kind of like the basic thing that we want to do from the stop other scripts in Sprite to hide. This is kind of what we want to do for all of these, most of all of these. So we can just take this and duplicate it and paste it under here for now. But like I said before, there are these broadcast messages that will happen if this specific button is pressed. So how can we do that? So if you notice from before, we had this clicked Boolean right here. So what we want to do is to make it say, if this particular button is being clicked, then we want to broadcast each of these messages. But if they are not clicked, then we can just move on with our code. So in order to do that, we can just bring out an if-then block. We can put one right after our stop other scripts in Sprite, because we can stop all of these other functions, and we can drag down a clicked Boolean and say, if this is clicked, then what can we do? Then we can broadcast the forward movement button clicked, right? Because that's what we want to do before we click, and then after we click it, then we can broadcast the animation finished. So that's what we can do right now. So under events, I can just bring out a broadcast message and make sure to select the correct message that you want to broadcast. And we can also, since we already have one for this block, we can go through the code and see it looks pretty much the same until this part, right? We can broadcast another message, but it's not over here. So what we can do is just bring out another one of these if then statements right underneath here, and this is pretty much in the same position as this other broadcast block over here, and we can bring out another broadcast button animation finished, and then to fill in this Boolean, we can just drag down the clicked Boolean again. So what this will do is if the particular button is clicked, then it will broadcast these two messages like I said before, along with the disappearing animation. But let's say it's one of these messages, the mouse movement button clicked, then we don't need to go through this long broadcast process. All we need to do is to just disappear, and we don't have to worry about broadcasting any of the messages. Okay, so now we're done defining what we want our method to do, but how do we put it into our actual code? Well, what we can do is to actually just replace the code, replace whatever's underneath here um, with um, with this one block right here under my blocks, disappear animation. So with this method, we've just taken this entire block of code, 5 block of code, and condensed it down to 1. So if you take this out now, just put this in, it looks a lot nicer than um, like this entire block of code that we had before. Okay. But as you can see, there's still a parameter missing, and that's our Boolean. So we still have to input a value into there to make it actually do something. So what needs to be in here is something to determine whether this button it is clicked or not. And usually if you don't know which button or like which message you're receiving, that can be kind of hard. But since we know which message, which button is getting clicked because of all of these different different like message receives, we know that for this one, the forward movement button isn't going to be clicked because the mouse movement button is the one being clicked. So we know that this parameter, this Boolean, has to be false because there's no way that both buttons can be pressed at the same time, right? So what I can do to force this or make this false is to just bring out an operator. And what I want to bring out is this one, the equals one. So I can bring this over here. And the simplest thing to do here now is to make something that is obviously not true and will never be true. So 1 could be 0 is equal to 1. So we all know that 0 is not equal to 1, right? But because we're making this false, we're only running this stop other scripts in Sprite and this disappearing animation. And if you know this, these 5 blocks are the exact same ones that we had before. But we just condensed it down into this one block so that it looks easier in our code. So now what I want everyone to do is to replicate this in under this driving movement button and also under our forever if statement, the first section right here, the if statement right here. So I want everyone to replace this code with this disappear animation block to make our code look a lot nicer. You have 30 seconds to do that. Okay, that should be enough time to replace the code. So I'm just going to go through it really quickly. The driving movement button clicked. It's the same thing as the mouse movement. And just delete this, duplicate that, and paste it under here. Now for this one, for the forever loop, we have this entire block of code to replace. But under this, it's not the same as this because under this is saying if we are touching, if the sprite is touching our mouse pointer and we're pressing it down, then we can broadcast these messages because that button is being clicked. So we can just bring out the same block, but under here we need to make this boolean true because um, because we know that it's being clicked. So the simplest thing to do here is to just make everything equal each other, and this can never be false, right? 0 is always equals 0, and you can't ever say that that's false, right? So now what you can do is just get rid of this 7-line code, and now you can see our code looks a lot nicer, but it still performs the same functions as before. So even if I click on this forward movement button, you can see that the disappear animation works, and that was true. And if I click on any of the other buttons, this animation is still true because, or this animation still works because we've defined it clearly and set a boolean value to make it not broadcast any messages. So here's the first kind of mini challenge today. I want, okay, if you go to my blocks and you go to like any other sprite, you can see that it doesn't come up anymore. That's because these methods are created specifically for that sprite that you're working on. But you can also transfer it to other sprites. You can like copy paste, do whatever you want. But what I want everyone to do now is to get your disappear animation method and transfer it to your other buttons. And one tip here is to make sure that the message that you're broadcasting matches the messages that you're broadcasting underneath your forever loop, or else your code won't work. Okay, so I'll give everyone like 2 minutes to do this, and remember the copy paste methods that I showed you before, how we copy paste before. And if you can't remember, just ask in the chat, and I'll explain it briefly. But for the next 2 to 3 minutes, work on transferring this method to all of your other buttons. Okay, everyone should be done. Okay, everyone should be done with transferring this code, and I'll just quickly show you how to easily copy paste this into all of these other blocks right here. So what you can do is just drag this method from here and then bring it to any of your buttons and make sure it wiggles, and then you can just drop it. I'm going to drop it twice, one into the driving and one into the mouse. And then from here, I can just change these methods. So this one would be driving movement button clicked and driving movement animation finished. Then I can just replace. Okay, and should also be the same for our mouse movement. Okay, so everyone should be done with this process of making their disappear animation for each sprite, and now we can just test it again and see if all the normal functions work. We test each button, all the things that we want to pop up still pop up, and the different sprites still move in the way that we want. Like, so if that is also true for everyone else, that means that you've done this step correctly. Okay, so now what we're going to do is to start making a little maze game for us to test our kind of like different gaming skills on, also to be more creative in this course. So we have these different buttons, and as you can see from here, the name of this game is Maze Game. So our players who want to play our game, they want to see a maze. So before we start creating the maze, we want to create kind of an open door, like kind of a portal to a new stage if we want. So we're going to first be creating a door to get our player from the current stage that they're on to a different stage. So just hover over this and click on the paint button. Then it'll bring you to this screen. And what I want everyone to do now is to just make a door. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just probably make sure that it looks somewhat like a door and the players can recognize it from wherever they're looking. And then if you're making like rectangles on your door, be sure to copy paste so you know that they're all about the same size. Okay, so does everyone have door shape? If you don't have this, just at least have some sort of rectangle that you can use as a placeholder for the door. Okay, so this is our door, and for our game, we want we kind of want the player to start in one position of our game area. Then we want the door to be on the opposite direction. So we want the door to be about here. So we can position it to be there. And remember which block we had under motion. And we can use a go to XY block. Just change the values so that it can be in that approximate spot. So that looks good. But we don't want our door to be showing when the game screen is on, right? We don't want it to be showing on the home screen because this looks kind of confusing on the home screen. So first what we want to do is to hide it, but how do we make it show at the right time? How do we make it show when each one of these sprites show? If you look under events, you'll notice that there actually aren't any blocks that say when this sprite is shown, then you can show. But if you look down here at the fourth one under events, you'll see that there's one called when backdrop switches to. So remember in I think our last class, we created two different backdrops for our game. We created one for the menu screen, the home screen, and we also created one for the game to be played on. And we also made sure to set each one to the corresponding backdrop. Now, instead of saying when I receive animation finish, instead of having all three of these underneath our door, because we already have a when backdrop switches to, we can just use this in replacement of the three different message calls you had here, and we can just make it show at the correct time. So we want it to show when it is on the game page, right? When it reaches the green. So if we test it and just click on any button you have here, and now you can see our door in the corner. And now, if you think that you made your door a little bit bigger than you want it, then you can just change the size, or set size, and you can just change it to 50% if you wanted. Okay, see now our door is pretty small, so that's good for right now. Okay, so now that we have a door for kind of a portal to a next stage, we need to make sure we set each one of our sprites to a correct position. So let's just start with the cat. So right now the cat is starting at any random position and we can move it freely around. But like I said before, I want all of the sprites to start in this bottom left corner and make it way towards the door. And if you notice right now, the cat is a little, it's pretty big. And the maze that we're going to make, the cat probably won't entirely fit through. So we can change that really quickly. We can go here under, we can use a set size again. Just make it 50%. And if you play this, you can see that our cat is much smaller and it can fit through smaller cracks. But it's still starting at a random position. So I'm just going to take this go to random position block out and bring in a new motion block, and I can put it anywhere I want, just not inside of this forever loop. And I'll set it to -200, -130. So around this position right here. If I run it, you can see that our cat starts in the bottom left corner and it can go towards the door. Okay. And if you notice, there's a problem with this door that we have. We want it to be an entryway to the next level or like the next costume, the next maze level that we create. But right now it's just still staying on the same screen. And that's because we haven't added any message calls to say that, oh, when the sprite's touching this door, then we must go to something else. But since we don't have a maze yet, what we're going to be doing first is to just say if the cat is touching the door, then we want to go back to this position, right? Because we want, for all of the maze levels, we want the cat to always be starting in the same position to make it have this longest distance between the cat and the door, and keep that always the case. So in order to do that, I can bring out another one of these. I can bring out another if-then block and put it on top right here. Put it on top of what I already had. Make sure you put it on top and not like inside one of them. And drag it underneath the forever loop. And under sensing, we have a touching block. And right now it says touching mouse pointer, but we have all of these different sprites that we can choose from. So I'm going to choose door. So if the cat is touching the door, then we can go back to the same position, -200 and -130. So if you look, if I'm touching the door, then I go back to the start. And it's like that for every time. But if you notice, our game board looks a little bit plain, right? And what we need to do next is to actually create the different levels for the maze game that we're going to be creating. So once again, we're going to be creating a new sprite and painting it because we want to create our own levels, our own game that we want to play. Okay. Okay, so now that we're in this new sprite, I'm going to call it levels because this is going to be the different levels of our game. And then now you can just start creating levels. And for what we're doing right now, just try to try to make your levels as easy as possible so that we can test the code more easily. And then once you're done with this, you can go home, can code more levels, you can make more levels, make harder levels, and see if you can beat them. But for what we're doing right now, let's create some simpler levels so that we can pass and see what our code will look like. So I'm just taking a red block, going to put it in the corner over here, and then I'm just going to make the cat go from this position all the way to the door. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and label this costume level 1, because how we're going to be creating all the other costumes, all the other levels, is through this costume step. So if I click here and I click duplicate, you can see that this number automatically goes to level 2, and we have the same thing, but we can just change this one block to something else for the next level. So I'm just going to really quickly make block here and then block right here. Okay, but now if we run our code, you can still see this red box in the way, and we don't want it to show when we show the maze game, right? Because this blocks our vision, and the maybe some people, they can't fully read what's underneath here. So same as what we did for this door, we can just make it hide and show when we want it. So remember, when it's clicked, then we can hide it, and when the backdrop switches to the green, the bright green, the game backdrop, then we can show it. And if you notice here, our levels tab, our levels sprite isn't completely centered, so we can just fix that by changing these X Y values, and then also making sure it goes to that same position every single time by bringing out go to XY block. Okay, now if you run it and you click on this, now you can see that our game, we have some sort of like structure for a game, right? But if you notice, there are some problems here. So first, we are starting on what we labeled as level 2, and we always want to start at level 1, right? So we need to fix that. And also, the cat is going underneath these lines, right? And usually for a maze game, there's a hard stop at any of like the borders, right? So we also want to fix that so that the cat doesn't go underneath, and that if it does touch it, it will be sort of above it. And also, if we do touch it, then it will make the cat go back to the starting position here. The last problem there is probably when we reach the door, it goes back to the same position, but we're still on that same level, right? We're still on the same level that we were on before, and we can't go forward any levels. So we're also going to change that. But what we're going to be changing first is to make sure the cat can't go underneath any of these walls. So if we go to our cat, underneath the looks, there's there's something at the bottom here called layers. So what the layers allow you to do is it allows you to see like which one you want to be put on top and which one be put on the bottom. So it's kind of like you have like a stack of books, and then you keep on putting books on top. And then when you want to reach a book from the bottom, you can take it out and then put it back on top. So that's kind of how layers work. You can set which layer a certain sprite goes to, and you can set if it's like above or below. And if one sprite is below the other, that means it will kind of be hidden by the other sprite. So that's what these layers are. And you can, like the stack of books I talked about before, you can have like multiple layers. You can have like squares, have books on top of books on top of books. Or the easiest way to do this, instead of picking which layer is the top layer or the bottom layer, then we can just go here, go to front layer and bring it down to this cat. And what go forward by one layers means is that let me say you had these stacks of books right over here, right? And if you wanted to go forward one layer, let's say a book was all the way down here, and you want it to go up one layer, then you will make it go slowly up each layer. But if you just wanted it to go to the very top, then you can bring out the go to front layer and bring this block all the way to the top right here. Okay, so that's what layers are. But since we already have one for this, we also need to make it for our levels and doors sprite, because we can't have, let's say, the cat going behind the door, right? Cat kind of has to be on top of the door. So we want this to go to the back layer. Not the very back layer. You can, if it goes to the back layer, then make it go backward one layer. Then for our levels, we can also go backward one layer. Okay, so now if we test it, you can see our cat goes successfully over all of these, and for a split second you can see it actually go a little bit over our door. Okay, so now that we have a general format for our game, we need to make it so that our sprite doesn't just keep on going on top of this red space, right? So we want it to only go on this green space, and if we touch the red space, then we want it to go back to its original position. So that's going to be our next challenge for today. So remember what we did for when it touched the door. You can go here. Now I want everyone to see how you can make the cat go to the very beginning when it's touching this red levels barrier. So 1 minute to do that. Okay, that should be enough time. So the same thing as we did for the door, what we can do is just take this out for a second and then duplicate this block and then put it underneath. Remember, underneath, not inside. Underneath our touching door code. And what we can write here is to say levels. So if it's touching levels, then we go back to the home. If it's touching the door, then we can also go back to the home. So now if I test it and I continuously run into the wall, oh, okay, so you can see my cat goes back to the beginning. And when I touch the door, it does the same, like this, right? Goes back to the same position it was before. And there's a very similar like scenting block that I don't think we've talked about before, is this touching color block. So you can set the specific color of like if like the cat is touching red, then go to the same position. But this only works if you make all of your levels the same color. Okay, but if you, let's say I wanted to make my level 3, I wanted to make something like this, but make it blue. Okay, then in this case, if this blue block is here, then this touching color block, it won't work because this it's still part of the levels, but it's not red. So if you pull out a touching color block and the cat touches this blue blob, blue circle, then it will still go past it. It will still go on top of it without any consequences. So if you want to use this touching color block, you can, but you just need to make sure that all of your levels are the same color or else it won't work. Okay, so let's fix another problem. We just fixed the cat running into the blocks and it not like making the cat go back to the beginning. Now that we fixed that, you see that we created 2 levels, right? So this is the current second level that we're on. So this is level 2 that we're on. But we need to make sure it starts on level 1. This costume called level 1 every single time. So same as our title text. We switch the costume. That's the same thing that we're going to do. We can switch the costume at the very beginning, switch the costume to level 1, and make sure that it goes to level 1 at the very same time, at the beginning of each game. So you can look here, it's at level 1. And if I just click on level 2, so now you can see it's at level 2. And if I press the start button again, you can see, oh, it goes back to level 1. But now that we have like that figured out, we can't really go to our next level, right? We can't really go to the next level because our door portal isn't exactly working. It's bringing us back to the same place, but it's not working as kind of bring us to next level. So how do we just make things change in Scratch? Make different sprites change when something happens? Well, what we can do is to just broadcast all of these messages, right? We broadcast the messages again, but for the cat touching the door, then we can switch the levels each time. So under the cat, remember we have this if touching door block, and we can broadcast a new message here, one that's different than all of these button animation, button clicked blocks. We can create a new message, and we can call it level complete, right? Because when the sprite reaches the door, it means that we've completed the level. So that's what we want. And then underneath the levels, we can receive that same message. So when I receive level complete, what do I do? Well, when you receive level complete, then you can go to the next costume. But you have to be careful here in selecting which block you want. So at the beginning, we used switch costume to block. But there's a block underneath that and says next costume, and we want to use that. And that's because as you have more and more levels, you don't want to continuously having like a bunch of a bunch of like messages that tell you, okay, level 1 complete, level 2 complete. That'll be a lot of code and it will take a long time to write out. So we can just put next costume and it will go to the next costume on our list. So right now we only have 2, but let's say if you have 5 and after each one you reach the door, then it'll go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So now if we test it, you can see that our cat still has the same same movements as before. It will go back to the beginning. But now when it touches this door, you can see that we go to the level 2. And when we go to the door again, okay, now it goes back to level 1, right? And that's because we don't really have an end to this level complete block. We only say next costume, and once it finishes all the costumes that you have, then it will jump back to the very first one that you have. But we don't want our players to be continuously playing this game, right? We don't want them to get to, let's say, level 10 and have them go back to level 1. Right. So okay. That's not something that we're going to be doing today. Instead, for the last 10 minutes or so, we're going to be opening up some breakout rooms for you guys to just continue making more levels for your game. I want everyone to have at least 5 levels before we leave, and make sure that you can actually be able to somewhat solve each of the levels and get through each of the levels, because we want to see that your code really works for what we have right now. So that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of our time here. So I think we have Right. I think we have the breakout rooms opened, I think. Yeah. Everyone go into your breakout rooms and can work together on creating your levels. Okay, while we wait for the last few people to come back from the breakout rooms, I hope everyone has had some time to create their levels with people on your team. At least 5 levels for now. That's all we need for right now. And before we leave this session for today, I just wanted to teach everyone how to kind of go to a kind of like a congratulations screen for completing the entire game. So, like we saw before, when we make our way to our last level, so okay, so this is my last level, but when I go across here, when I hit this door, I will still be going back to the first level because that's the next costume in the set, right? It's the next costume just starts over from level 5 back to level 1. Remember, like I said before, we don't want that. So we can change that really quickly. So it's still going to be under the same level complete message, but instead of just this one block, we're actually going to bring out an if-else block and put the next costume inside of else. But what we want to do under if is say that if the level that we're on is level 5, then we can broadcast a message, something that will say, okay, you've won the game. So what Scratch actually has under looks is these bubble blocks, and it can tell you like the costume number that your spread is on, the backdrop number, the size, like we saw before. What we can do is we can bring out a costume number bubble, and if you can see here, each one of our levels, if you labeled them correctly, each one of them is associated to a number. You can see in the top left here. And we can say, so our last costume is costume number 5. And we can say if the costume number is equal to costume number 5, then we can broadcast a new message to go to a game 1 screen. So in order to do that, I can just bring out an operator here, put it inside of this boolean, and then change this to costume number equal to 5. Now after I do that, I can go under events and broadcast a new message here, a new message that says game 1. Okay, so this is where we're going to stop in the lecture part of it today. And for homework this week, we already have kind of like our game 1. We know that it's going to broadcast. We know that the Sprite is going to broadcast this game 1, but we don't actually have a screen for it. We don't actually have a text that will say, oh, you won this game. So that's what I want everyone to create for next week. So a little hint for this, remember when we talked about layers? So the backdrop is always going to be the very back layer, and you can't go behind that. And so in order to make this as less complicated as possible, what you would actually want to do is to create a new sprite. Okay, so I want everyone to, for this week, create a game 1 screen at the very end of your code. And for an extra step, see if you can make it show only when our cat finishes the last level. Okay, so everyone clear with that? Okay, it doesn't look like anyone here has any questions. I've pasted the link to what we've done today. Everything that we did today in our class, I posted it in the chat, and so you can see all the levels that I created. See, maybe if you want to create similar levels, create more levels, whatnot. Okay. Okay. So that's it for this week of the Scratch course. Remember to do your homework for next time and come a little bit early to the next class so you can just submit your homework before we start moving. And yeah, if anyone doesn't have any questions, free to leave. But if you do have questions, feel free to stay on and we'll answer them.
Okay, should we go to a breakout room or like class evaluation?
Yeah, sure.